Tech Drop-in session for today, and I'm glad that we have a lot of attendees that have been here before time. So thank you so much for being online prior to 11 a.m. here in Melbourne. It's been a lovely week so far, and it's good to have you all here. So I'm just going to wait for Trudy to give me a kickoff and a thumbs up in terms of the recording and the logistics.
All good, Anna. Over to you.
Thank you, Trudy. And Ranga, can you unmute and just wave to the camera so that we can see if you're online and hearing us?
Yes, all good. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining yet again for our Veritas Tech Drop-in session. Today's session is more focused on getting your IT service analytics in place. So it's going to be the same format. Ranga, if you could just go to the next slide, please. It's just going to be the same format as we've done, for all our previous sessions. We will have a 25-minute session where we want to talk about our product proposition. We want to also spend some time on talking about our customer experiences, but more importantly, we want to demonstrate the product or demonstrate the solution. Now, this is where I'm, looking at spending as much time on the demo and getting feedback and questions from you. Now, please note this is an open forum. Our objective is to give you access to our architects in Australia and New Zealand. We would want you to be as candid and as as open as possible in your questions. Use the Q&A Q&A section of this WebEx to put in your questions. We have a team in the Veritas attendees who are here to answer, and we will also make sure that if there are some questions that are not answered, we will reach out to you separately. And then there is one more incentive of asking a question, which is a JB5 voucher. Ranga, if you could just click once more. So the best question today will get a $50 JB Hi-Fi voucher. So, stay tuned, stay, alert, and make sure that you get all your questions in the Q&A. As we go along, I will try to answer as much questions as possible on the chat window. And we will also have some pauses and breaks during the session where we can get some questions answered. So for today, I have Ranga with me. Ranganatha Bharadwaj is our specialist in IT analytics. Ranga does a lot of things, in terms of IT analytics and SaaS as his area of expertise. And Ranga is going to talk us through our session today. And of course, I'll be facilitating this session. I have Trudy here to help me. Now, before I hand it over to Ranga, I actually wanted to just run a quick poll. And Trudy, can you just help us with the poll? All right, so you should see a poll in the polling tab of the WebEx right now. And the question is, does your organization currently have the ability to visualize, correlate, and measure your IT service using analytics? Now, this is something that we've heard from a lot of our enterprise customers. Having an ability to visualize, correlate, and measure the IT service in terms of the analytics perspective is important, and that's where we wanted to set that baseline. Now, I am going to give another 10 seconds for you to, it's a warm-up question. We'll have a few more during the session, but I'll wait for another 5 seconds, and then we'll see how we go. So, Trudy, can we now close the poll? Yeah, thank you. The results will be out, and I should be able to get a quick view on how we are faring. And as we move along, Ranga, if you could just go to the next slide, is where I'm going to hand it over to Ranga as soon as the poll outcomes come, is where how Veritas can help you simplify your IT service delivery using Veritas APTARE. And we'll probably, yep, there it is. So we've got a 42% saying no answer. That means that we were probably not quick enough or we didn't give enough time, but we've seen some about 25% now saying that it's somewhat. So it's a mix, it's a partial position. So maybe by the end of this session, this could help all of us to drive down what that partial can go from a partial to yes. Over to you, Ranga.
Thank you very much, Amit. Welcome everyone to our bi-weekly session of Tech Drop-in. So today we are going to talk about APTARE, specifically IT operations analytics. Now, during other Tech Drop-in session, we have outlined our solution sets. Predominantly, it's our API, the availability, protection, and insight piece of the functionality. Now, today, I want to outline this insights piece where we are looking at a bottoms-up view of the entire infrastructure and how we can deliver it as an analytics as a service functionality. Now, when I mean overall customer experience, I'm not talking about just about storage or just about cloud, just about compute or other elements involved or subsystems involved there. There could be a lot of subsystems, hyperconverged environments, computes, and so on. What we are talking today about is the ability to visualize things. So how can we visualize? So is there a visibility of your environment? Let's face it, what you don't know, you don't know. So if you don't know, you can't see that information, and there is not effective service there. So you want to have that visibility of all your physical and logical elements in your infrastructure so that this IT service can be stitched together, and then you understand that whether there is a risk in the environment, is that risk visible to you? And with that visualization, you get controllability. So can you control this environment? So control in the sense, once you know how your IT service is performing, then you can start to see that, hey, how can we move certain aspects of our infrastructure to another location? So is there some kind of disaster recovery, some kind of business service that we can align or we can move around, orchestrate? So all these controllability stuff comes from visualization. Now, in the last Tech Drop-in, those who attended that, so Amit ran a session on VRP where he talked about how orchestration can be done, how InfoScale is part of that that play as well, and how we can roll it out as a business service and push it across based on the tier, application tier that is there, how important that application tier is, and you can make it as auto run books and so on. So that's controllability. Now, once you can visualize and control an IT service, then you can start to measure it. So measurement comes from for your IT operations services, or it could be all the way up to your C-level executive. So who has the measurability of how you're performing in the organization, what needs to be done. So it all comes down to functionality. So your compliance, are you compliant? Are you doing everything? Is there a backup mechanism? Is there a disaster recovery mechanism? How often it is happening? Are the information getting protected? Where is the risk? And once you identify the risk, what is the cost associated to it? So these are the three key things that we are going to talk about today. Now, that comes out to a discussion as what is APTARE IT Analytics? Now, this APTARE IT it's a cloud-based IT analytics platform that provides unique correlated insights across any cloud, any backup, and then any storage. So what we do this is purely through an agentless functionality. So there is no need for any agent. We collect this information across and we correlate it in an effective way at a centralized location using a relational database. So when it comes to IT analytics, taking a consolidated approach is an effective way to manage your operational diversity. So this is the only vendor agnostic analytics platform for backup storage and cloud. So many of the environments, so even in the poll when you attended, when we say somewhat, what you're trying to say here is you have got a tool which can do one aspect of it. Maybe you can do using your VOps functionality or vRealize functionality, or using one single component where it can generate reports on one single platform or functionality. What APTARE IT Analytics is doing is correlating it as an end-to-end functionality, going across from storage, compute, virtualization, your a fiber channel, that is, it could be your Brocade, Cisco's, and so on, and then the host environment, the storage arrays, heterogeneous. So no, it's not, it's a vendor agnostic functionality across any backup cloud and storage. Right, so as I said, at the center of this sits a data collector, which is an agentless data collector. Now, traditionally, organizations rely on a lot of reporting tools. Now, what this means so far is using some specific tools is doing lots and lots of log collection, exporting it as CSVs or spreadsheets, aggregating it to a central portal, and then feeding it, and try to get sort of a reference point to say that, are we in there, can we visualize everything? And there is a lot of moving parts there that is missed out of these reports. So what APTARE IT Analytics gives you is that complete visibility end to end. So at the center of this lies a component called a data collector, and this data collector goes and non-intrusively goes and collects the information in a time-bound manner. So for different types of functionalities, it goes at a specific time interval, collects the information. Now we collect in excess of 30,000 data points, and we store it in securely in a backend relational database. Now this data collector, yeah, there you go. It collects the information there, and then it sends it out to a centralized portal. And this centralized portal is also called as an APTARE portal with a backend of an Oracle database. And this can be achieved across any location. And I can sit at the comfort of my home and look at all these information. We persist with this data. Whatever data that we collect, we store it forever. We persist with the data, and we parse the information to generate hundreds and hundreds of reports, whether it could be out-of-box reports or it could be customized reports. All right, so as an overview of why APTARE IT Data Collector, so one, it gives you the unified visibility across on-prem, hybrid, cloud environments, wherever the information is. Now there is a centralized control of data. There is advanced analytics available, many different types of reports that could be generated, and it can be used for your risk assessment, data center optimization, cost-based metrics based on a project, based on a functionality. So it's proven. It has been deployed in Fortune 10 companies, and they've seen this functional. So a lot of people have looked at it in an intricate way and identified a lot of reports that are otherwise not visible in a normal reporting functionality. All right, so what we do is before we go through a demo, I would want Trudy to go through one more poll question here. All right, so at this time, does your organization use any analytics for any of the listed functionality? If you do it for multiple functionality, select them. So let us know what sort of IT analytics you do today. Meanwhile, any questions, Amit?
Hi, Ranga. A couple of questions. I was about to start typing the responses, but I thought it's probably a good idea to voice them over. So, I'll let the poll finish, and then we can just round up with the questions.
Okay. So meanwhile, I'll get ready for the demo aspect of it.
Yep, I think we are good to close the poll, Rudy. We've given 30 seconds. All right, as we wait for the results, Ranga, the first question that I had was, how do you use or what do you use to collect the data, provided there are no agents? How is the data gathered from the endpoints?
So we use something called as, very good question there. So we use something called as SDKs or software development kits. So what that does is, in many cases, we use these APIs predominantly. And in some cases, the vendor themselves have approached us and they have written APIs so that they want to collect that information and they want to send it northbound and analyze it. So we use APIs basically, and then we collect this information and centralize it. So that's what we do.
Brilliant. And so basically, these are vendor native mechanisms. I mean, each vendor has their recommended way of getting, extracting data out from those subsystems. So APTARE leverages, either APIs, it could be any other modules that the vendor prescribe, and that's how we are able to gather information without an agent. The second question, Ranga, was, does APTARE offer any way to integrate or reflect data from ServiceNow?
Very good question, and the answer is yes. So it's a bridging mechanism for ServiceNow. So through a backup manager, so there is an app available through ServiceNow as well if you go through their app store, or you can do it through APTARE. So what this does is, ServiceNow has an information about the entire infrastructure, the what hosts are there. So it has got the information about everything. APTARE has got analytics of everything. So we can merge them together and say that, hey, what hosts are missing in APTARE that ServiceNow knows? So ServiceNow knows these clients, and does APTARE know that all these clients have been protected or not? So things like that. So you can definitely integrate it with ServiceNow. Definitely possible.
Brilliant. Thank you. And the last question is, how long are the logs kept? What is the retention period?
It's not the logs. We hold the data. We hold the data forever unless you want to get rid of it. So that's why I said we do that part very, very well. So we persist with the data. So that way we can give you the trending and forecasting mechanisms very well. So what happened previously, what happened in the past, how we are going now, and what would be the trend in the future. So we persist with the data forever.
Brilliant. And probably the next question that I would, or probably the last question before the demo, is the question was around, how is the data stored in cloud? So let me rewind a little bit and talk about the deployment model. So APTARE is a deployment model, which is a multi-tiered deployment model. Now, there are multiple ways that people can start using it. So one of the ways is completely deploying this as an on-prem inbound solution. So everything sits within your enterprise or within your data center or your trust boundary, and the data stays, or everything that has been discovered has been, stored within that trust boundary. So we don't really let the data out, and it's not hosted in Veritas. It's basically a solution that is hosted in your environment. Now, APTARE actually gives you a flexibility to host this in cloud service delivery model, but then the flexibility is up to you. And so if you choose to keep everything inbound within your trust boundary, then the data sovereignty is taken care of. All right, so the full results are out, Ranga, and we are looking at around a mix, a response where the file is 13% storage, and coincidentally, data protection both sit in 25%, and we've got 20% in cloud. So maybe I think the demo is
Right.
going to help us with some more clarifications, and I've got some questions which probably we'll take as we go along in the demo.
Okay. Give me one moment. I'm bringing up my demo environment here. All right, hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Amit, can you confirm that? All good? All right.
Yes.
Now,
Ranga, the font,
APTARE portal.
Ranga, the resolution is a little smaller for my old eyes to see. If you could just, bring up the resolution a little bit.
That's the part I struggle on Chrome. Zoom.
That's perfect.
Much better?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So move the camera here. So this is the portal view. The moment you log on to the APTARE, you get to see multiple aspects of it. Now, today, as I said, I have a specific use case that I'll be talking about. However, just for clarity purposes here, I would want to start with a bit of information on APTARE. As I said, at the central point for APTARE is a data collector. Now, this data collector could be installed. Now, so I have this collector administration right there. Now I have got multiple folders that are visible on the right-hand side. Now, imagine all these folders are representing each of your data centers. So if you have 5 data centers, so these folders are represented as data centers, and this is where the data collectors are, and it is collecting information. So collecting information across multiple different aspects of it. So it is collecting a lot of information across the environment. Now, also this tool is built as a multi-tenancy tool right from ground up. What it also means is it could be used by the likes of MSP as a service provider for different customers. So that's one way of looking at. Or it could be a large enterprise or an organization where there could be multiple departments, multiple cost centers, or they could be production, DevOps, there could be DR. So you could be looking from those perspectives as well, and you could create something called as host groups, so that you are associating what categories these fall under, so that you could look from a cost metrics or from risks metrics, apply it only to specific departments, specific customers, or subfolders, that is each sites and so on as a data center. So you can look from those perspectives. So that's the minimal that you need as a collector, and you install it on the data centers. Now, once it collects in a time-bound manner, now I have something called as inventory here. Now you can see that there is a lot of collections that are happening in this environment. So a lot of collections there. So it could be heterogeneous storage arrays that it has collected information from, or it could be from the virtualization environment. So it collects from that perspective, or it could be from a host perspective, many different hosts that are identified by the data protection, or it could be the virtual machine service itself you're looking at, or it could be hardware, or it could be certain compute hosts in the environment. So it starts inventorying and collecting information from these locations, and it starts persisting with that data. And now we can see that there is already information here. Now today, my use case is talking from 3 key functionalities. One is compliance, 2 risk, and then the third one is cost. So compliance, what you didn't know so far. So as I said, there could have been tools used by different groups within the company or within the organization who are looking in their own spaces and saying that, okay, we are covered with this. But there was no centralized repository of that information. And even if that was done in a very, very complicated way, and there was no complete visibility of it. Now you have, from a compliance perspective, you have the complete visibility of your infrastructure or the service that you're providing, and you're seeing all of them under one single pane of glass. 2, you can see the risks that are associated. The risks could be in terms of the storage. There's memory, there's CPU, there are disks that you can see here. So whether the disks are in any kind of risk of hitting the max. So I can see it from here as well. So there you go. So the usage, so there is a risk part there. Can you analyze that particular risk? So which one are functioning better, which one are not functioning better? So are you able to see those risks? Or even from a data protection perspective, from an inventory, how many jobs has run, and so on. So let me just quickly show that. From a backup server's perspective, now it collects information from multiple backup servers. So now it is showing how many jobs have been completed over a period of time, how many jobs have failed, and so on. Right? So you get to see that, and you can further dig into each one of those. So how many have failed? So if I click on that, it will generate it as a repo. Now, this is from an inventory perspective and compliance and risk perspective, and you can quickly start looking at many different aspects of it. This is all out-of-box references that you can pick up. Now, I've got some reports that have been generated already. So I've run an inventory report, so how my environment looks like in terms of SAN capacity utilization or object storage utilization or NAS and so on. Now, what is the enterprise capacity? Are we under the capacity? Are we running through it? Now, in terms of usage, how are we running through it? Now, how many virtual machines are there in a given environment? So this is showing from an Azure perspective. Now, if you're also looking at certain entities. Now, you also see something called as host groups. Now, it is targeting the entire domain. Now, I could go into a subgroup or a particular departmental functionality, and I could look from a departmental functionality of how it is per departmental breakdown. I can view from that. How is the capacity used? I could look at from a project perspective how it is happening. So that's my compliance. Now, other things that I can look at is from a VM.
Ranga, quick one on the compliance bit there. Are these reports, customizable? Can we just play around with, what matters? So every organization will have a different perspective of how the compliance needs are.
Right.
How easy it is to just flip and create a new compliance perspective.
Very good point there. Now, as you can see, there are many hundreds of reports that are available out of the box here. So you can see that there are reports for each category. So there is cloud for on-prem. You get to essentially they are the reports, but you're looking from a capacity perspective or a risk mitigation perspective or storage optimization perspective and so on. So there are multiple reports that are available, and within those reports there are reports like you see templates. So these are out-of-box reports that you get straight away. Or they could be reports that are also called as dynamic templates. So what this means is you get to customize them. So the moment I select the report in a template, I just get to run it. Whereas if it is a dynamic template, I can dynamically modify or customize. Now I get to see multiple data pointers here because it has collected those points. Now I can go customize these reports to my requirement. Now the other type of reports that we also see is a SQL template. So you can go and configure a SQL query, and you can start configuring it from a SQL perspective. So you can go write the queries, collect information from different perspectives. So you need not be a SQL expert here. So what you could use is a GUI tool as well. So as a SQL manager, and you could go, there are multiple views available where you can drag and drop information so that it builds the query for itself. So here are many different values that I can look for. As I said, it collects a lot of values there, and you can go select the values, put it to the right, configure it, and how you want to show the display as. So there may quite a number of options there, whether you want to see it as a graphical functionality or a tabular form for specific products and so on. Again, we're not going into the details, but yes, so there are many ways that you could configure the templates. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can build your own SQL templates by creating your own query builders and build the queries there, or drop in the views, and you can select those views to get appropriate results.
Brilliant. Thank you for that deviation. I'll not deviate too much from your flow then.
No, that's good. So the next one is, I was looking from a VM perspective. So let's say I have multiple data stores in my environment. How those VMs are associated, where are they associated, what LUNs are associated to those. So if you look at it, now it shows me where are the LUNs, so from which storage array it is associating to, what's the virtualization, is it thin provision, thick provision. Now you get a complete correlation. You can see that some of them are hosted on NetApps, some of them hosted on different types of storage. So you get to view that view, when was it last done, and so on. Now, apart from these reports, there is also something called as a report library. So what we do here is we provide functionalities like, these are all pre-built reports, or you can still further customize it. So there is a SQL query already provided there. If you want to, you can modify it to your requirement, and those are the sample outputs that you would see. So you could see how is your VM functionality is happening, and what has happened since X number of days. What is the future demand? So we are looking at a forecasting perspective and so on. So all you need to do is download it as a template, import it into your proper reports here. So I've done many such custom reports, and I can build the reports further and get the reports. Now, once I have the reports available, I can continue to schedule the reports there. So I can send it as an email or set up on a schedule and then send. So every time this report runs based on the frequency that you have set up, it'll automatically email appropriate respective people, respective groups that are there. Now here is another dashboard that we are looking at. This is called as a multi-vendor dashboard. So it is looking from different backups. So how many backups have run across the environment? Now what are the different types of jobs? Now if I want to click, I can click here and see further, dig in further there, or generate appropriate reports there. What are the risks involved here? So how many jobs fail? So that's a risk. Similarly, there is one on the report that we recently generated. So this is ransomware risk assessment. So how are you ready? Is your environment ready for any ransomware attack? So if something happens, are you ready to go back in time? And how good are your backups? How good is your protection level, so that if you have to go back in time, can you do that? And what is the last known good backup? So this gives a bit of an overview where how we are doing in terms of protection. Right now, similarly, there is cloud cost optimization. What are the costs involved? So this is particularly helpful from your finance department or from a C-level executive perspective, or the one who owns the platforms. So they would be looking from a cost perspective. How much is it costing for us to host this in the cloud? How much is it costing to host it on-prem? And how are our tier one applications? What is it costing? Now, in order to do that, we provide you information about something called as chargeback. So you define what are the costs that you're incurring. So you know these values here. So you can put in, you can edit, and you can put in the values, what you are incurring in your environment for different tiered applications, for storage, and so on. So once you put those references, now it transforms into reports like this in the backend. Right? So I can do infrastructure optimization and so on. So there are, as I said, we wanted to give you a flavor of what you can do. So this is just not about a particular functionality. It is as a whole service. How is your organization working towards it? And where can you optimize it? Where can you do your savings? What is your risks? And can you measure it? That's,
Nice.
I'll stop it there.
Thanks, Ranga. Actually, there has been one question which was relevant to the backup piece that we just covered, and the question is, can the benefits of APTARE over OpsCenter analytics be listed when backup software is only net backup? So if I put this on the other way around, if an environment has Veritas net backup, what additional benefits can APTARE bring in to the table?
All right. So what we are looking at is only one aspect of it. So, I have just net backup. What is APTARE doing? What are the benefits of APTARE against OpsCenter? Yes, there are many customized reports that you can run. OpsCenter also gives you SQL, adding SQL queries and so on. And there are ups and downs with the report. While OpsCenter only looks from a net backup perspective, APTARE looks at the entire gamut of services, end-to-end correlation, which is missing in OpsCenter. OpsCenter can only look at net backup as a functionality, as a product. Whereas you have your virtualization, how many VMs have been protected? When was it protected? Where is it located? What are the different storage arrays that are in your environment? Have they been covered? So this information is not available with OpsCenter. So yes, OpsCenter gives you exclusive to net backup, and that's where I'm alluding to, is saying that don't look at from one product perspective, look at as an entire IT service, and that's where you will see that analytics is a much bigger picture.
Brilliant, thanks. And just to follow up on that, Ranga. So if I look at an IT service, now IT service could just be an aggregation of multiple compute resources. These could be virtual machines, these could be physical machines. Now, or these could be even cloud virtual machines or any other applications. Now, that's the compute layer. Then you have dependencies that run the compute layer. So these could be the underlying storage. Now, what monitoring an IT service in a measurable and a predictable manner would mean is to not just have an ability to see where the risks are in terms of the backup and recovery, but also trying to be more proactive and trying to forecast if there is a risk that can come through a different perspective. So, for example, if my storage is on a trajectory where in the next 3 months my storage is probably going to be out of capacity, so that is your proactive measure where you can now correlate that if my storage is running out of capacity, that might impact my current functional SLA, that my application or my service may not be running in 3 months time. So you want to mitigate that along with a challenge where backups come in. So you are now having a different perspective of correlating and up leveling that conversation beyond data protection. Is that a good summary, Ranga?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. I'll give it to you back for the demo. I have a few questions, which interesting questions have come up, but I'll let you finish the demo and then we can take those questions up.
Now, one last thing that I was trying to go here is, yes, you have these reports. As I said, there is a report library we can go and capture. So there are many different predefined templates there that you can go get that information. So one such information is how many times, what are my problematic clients, how many times they have failed, repetitive failures. So how many times they have failed, what is the longest running job. So these are some of the things that might be required in a service-oriented architecture, or where a project team would ask all these questions, and getting those reports straight away may not be possible with a single tool, whereas here we could go and look for that information because we have that persistent records or persistent information collected, and it is ready to go. quick, easy turnaround times. So that's where I wanted to stop and take questions.
Okay, cool. I have quite a few questions. So let's take the questions that came in from the pre-registration. The net backup question and the OpsCenter question was already answered. The other question was, Ranga, how is it licensed? And are there any prerequisites, example, OS and infrastructure?
Yes, it is supported on Linux and Windows architecture, so you can install it there. Now, from a license perspective, there are only 2 licenses that we look at. Now, one is called as a backup manager suite, which is doesn't matter how many of backup types you have. It could be generic backups. You could be doing Oracle backups, and you could have multiple other softwares across the organization between departments. So they all come under one single backup manager suite. So all we need is the number of backup hosts that are there. So it is charged based on that. And then the second license is capacity manager suite. Now, what this capacity manager suite is across your storage arrays, we take the raw terabytes and we charge you for every terabyte per terabyte. So that's the license there. If you're a normal customer, so using it for your organization, then Oracle's standard license comes with it. But if you're a managed service provider, then you need an Oracle Enterprise license. So if you have it, that's good, or there would be an additional cost to that license. So there are different SKUs there or licenses that are available there. So that's the overview of licensing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ranga. The next question is, how can Veritas demonstrate benefits around the new APRA CSP or the Section 234 legislation, IRAP, and the overall black box repository? So basically, from a compliance and governance point of view, how does Veritas help our enterprise customers?
This IRAP or any security functionality that we are looking at, they all come from, or CPG 234, they all come from a data management framework perspective. So we are looking from our top view of the data and how's the data there, what's the PII information, what you can retain, what you cannot retain. So there are some regulatory stuff there that is where you have to comply to those regulatory requirements. And because it comes under the data management framework, so we handle it in a different way. So this APTARE functionality is more of a bottoms-up view where we lay out the entire infrastructure and say that how is the infrastructure there, how are they correlated, and so on. So 2 separate discussions, but I'm happy to discuss this, take it as an offline question and answer them in more detail.
And I think this is a very good suggestion or a feedback for one of our next sessions, where I would actually want to talk about the data management framework as a whole. What we're talking about today is a component of the Veritas data management framework, but I think it'll be a good idea to walk through the overall framework and then hone into specific use cases. But good, thanks, Ranga. All right, so the next question I had, Ranga, was considering APTARE has a lot of information, and given that we collect a lot of information from from multiple endpoints, what are the authentication mechanisms? Does it support multi-factor authentication?
It does support multi-factor authentication, and you can integrate it with your domain and so on. And yes, it does support it.
Absolutely, and given that APTARE can be deployed in multiple manners, one could be a pure on-prem solution within your trust boundary. So people who are actually accessing it are within the organization, and APTARE does give you an ability to build a role-based access model. So even if you're talking about an internal deployment, it can still be deployed with multiple levels of authorization. And as Ranga said, it can integrate with your LDAPs or the Active Directories for authentication and support multi-factor authentication. So that's good. Thank you, Ranga. The next question is, For alerting, now this is probably an area that we may want to just see if there is time for it in the demo, where the options that we have for alerting and what if at all we're talking about email alerts, how does what are the really options that are supported. So that's probably we can get into the specifics over email. I didn't really want to get into the details of each and every alert, but on a high level, Ranga, if you could just walk us through what all alerting mechanisms are there, maybe that'll be a good summary.
So there is email functionality. You can schedule it according to requirements and send it as an email. Definitely, that's possible. And there is also alert-based administration that you can achieve through this. So based on certain specific functionalities, you can put in the thresholds. So once it hits the thresholds, so that's how it looks at the risk, right? So based on those references, you can put in an alert notification through SNMP or SMTP email. So as you can see there, so it does throw you a lot of options for alerting.
Perfect. Thanks, Ranga. Good. The next question I had was, can you talk about the correlation options in APTARE? Example, backup failures, and then APTARE can correlate it back to what that backup failure could be into a different ecosystem. So basically a backup failure leading into a disk failure on the VMware LUN or something which is a port issue.
Very good question. So in the backup job, for instance, I'll go here. So from a backup server perspective, I can see the error. So why the backup has failed? What's the reason for that? So you could dig in more, and if it has failed, why it has failed. So it'll go and show you the report of why it has failed or what was the reason for that failure, and then you can look at it further as to why it failed. Now, if it is for a VM perspective, yes, you can integrate it into a multiple things into one single dashboard and bring it all together and say that, oh, what are the VMs? What are the criticality of the VMs or the data stores? And then the backups appropriately. You could merge them together into a single dashboard, and you could view that from that perspective as well. So this can be merged with one more dashboard, and I could see something like this. So I can have multiple dashboards there, one coming from a VM ecosystem, how the data centers are performing, what's the risk or what's the storage functionality or errors that are coming up from that perspective, and also from a backup perspective, and match it across.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ranga. The next question was around how is the search functionality? Can we do granular searches?
What searches are you looking at? So you can search across all these. So I can search a particular host if I want to, let's say. Okay, so I can look at a particular host if I want to, and that shows up from a host perspective. Now you can see that in this host, it gives me all the host related information, and also I can view how it is associated. For example, in this case, it might take a while. So because I'm connected to a US host, and this is on a VPN. But nevertheless, what this is trying to show is how is the fiber channel connectivity. So it is saying that it is connected to this particular array, and it is going to that particular switch. So that's how the connectivity is happening, and through that host, it is going to talk to multiple things. So yes, you can search granularly to a host, to a storage array, to a virtual machine, anything possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's the one it was looking for.
Yes, and actually, given that we have reports which are a point in time as well as a schedule-based data gathering mechanism, you can always schedule reports to get a specific view, which is the granular view that we are looking at, or it could be at a data center level view. Now, that depends on how or what level of information you want. And then from an asset point of view, you can always use the search that Ranga just highlighted. So multiple ways of searching. All right. I think
Yeah.
the other question is related to the way we just saw the correlation of the host into SAN. Now the question is, how does APTAR model up complex fiber channel SAN topologies, multi-vendor arrays, physical and ESX host? How is this used to report on VMs hosted on which arrays for compliance, and provide a real-time views of noisy neighbor causing fiber channel slow performance? So I'll actually split this. Ranga, if you could talk through the correlation part, and then I'll briefly talk about the noisy neighbor in a bit.
Okay, so with reference to VM part, so what we do is whenever you add to the collector, whenever you add your ESX host into the environment, so that's where yeah, I can go search for it. There you go. So we collect the information about that vCenter functionality, and then it starts looking at all the VMs. So once we get to that vCenter, we can now start looking in its database and say how many VMs are there, and that's how we get that correlation part to what storage array it is associated to, and they all come under the data storage part. And now it starts to list all the storage arrays there. But what exactly that storage array? Now it is looking from a raw capacity, and then it is probing that information from a capacity perspective, and then it is displaying that, and that you would see it under the arrays part of it. So one is the virtualization part, and the other is the capacity part of it. Now, when it comes to fiber channel, though, is that what you wanted to talk about?
Well, let me finish this chain of thought here. So, if you look at any virtualization architecture, it will have the dependency. So, for example, in VMware, we'll have the virtual machine dependent on the storage, which are the VMDK files. Now, these VMDK files are typically hosted on, a LUN. Now, this LUN could be a fiber channel, or it could be, any other network protocol. Now, what APTAR does is, we then, now that we've inquired the VMware ecosystem, we then also go to the storage array and then map the storage array discovery with the VMware discovery. That's where the correlation comes in. And if that is a fiber channel based discovery or a connectivity, then in the previous map that Ranga showed, we can actually correlate which host is connected to what storage array through a fiber channel or a SAN connectivity. And now coming very specific to the noisy neighbor. Now, noisy neighbor is just one of the proliferations of an inappropriate or a functional issue in the environment. So what APTAR focuses is to bring you the visibility of the environment, and gives you the ability
did I lose somebody?
and then I'm not seeing a lot of operations happening on that side. That is one of those symptoms that could be noisy neighbor, but it could be something else as well. So APTAR gives you the ability to zero in as needed. So that's where the benefit comes through. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to go quickly and see, because I have a couple of questions that have come through. The next one is, with all storage vendors supported, is there a minimum software package required from each storage vendor to gather detailed storage analytics?
Very good question. So all we need is the ports. So there are some specific ports that are required to be open. So once you open the ports, it communicates over that. So there is no specific vendor package that is required. Although there are, in certain cases, there are certain dependencies. Now this is mandated by that particular storage vendor. So you should have the right type of environment, and that's about it. So in most cases, it is agentless, as we say.
So basically, no minimum specification. Of course, we have our support metrics in terms of which arrays we support, and there is also an
Yeah.
SDK where we can build support for newer technologies.
That's correct. So we support all of those. So all you do is select that data collector, go through, and we have different storage vendors, and similarly from a data protection perspective, and what we do from a virtualization or cloud perspective.
Yep, that sounds good. All right, the next question I have is, this is still going into alerts. And in terms of the alerts, can we get the error codes, and can we see the error codes? I think that's where the alerting question was more, or the alerting question was more aimed at.
Yeah.
So error codes are visible, yeah?
Error codes are visible. So error codes are visible in terms of what it is, what the issue is. Now, are you looking from a backup error code or a virtual machine error code? Oh.
It could be, it's not. It could be a VM. That's what I'm making out of the question. But if the virtual machine is experiencing errors, these could be IO errors, or these could be even um, any other errors that are visible to the hypervisor. Maybe those are the ones that we're looking at.
I don't think it'll do an event capture, but what you could do is, because we collect a lot of data points, it can definitely be customized. So you don't see it straight away out of the box in the inventory as such, but you can develop a customized report to collect such information.
Sounds good. All right. So with 4 minutes remaining, I am probably going to ask you, Ranga, to go back to the slide deck. And I would probably just go straight up into our, contact information, because of course this is an interesting and a deep rooted topic. There are different perspectives and use cases that come up. So what we suggest to all attendees is to reach out to us on the email address that will come up shortly, and give us a very high level use case or the challenge that you're trying to solve, and we'll make sure that we reach out to you with specific solutions. And if that means that we at least have a discussion that then eventually leads to a specific use case and a demo, that's where we start adding value into your challenges. Because APTARE, as you've seen, we gather 30,000 data points across so many technologies. It just cannot, even if we allocate 2 hours or 3 hours, we cannot just walk through each and every functionality. So that's where we want to get precise in terms of addressing your specific challenge in service analytics. And that's why feel free to write out to this email address, and we'll make sure that we schedule something and walk you through what Veritas can offer. So with that, I think I am going to call it a meeting. Thank you all for joining, and I will as we finish, we will review all the questions, and as promised, the JB Hi-Fi, the $50 JB Hi-Fi voucher, we will reach out to the winner. The content that we shared right now is something that we will circulate. We will get you the recording of this demo as well. And if there is any additional feedback that you had from the session, or if you had questions, feel free to reach out to us. Or with that, I would call it a session. Thank you all for joining. Over to you, Trudy.
Thanks all for joining. We'll be closing the call now, but look out for an email with the presentation recording and details of our winner. Thanks all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ranga. Thanks for the brilliant demo. Thanks.